Welcome everyone and all to the Dan and Lew Show. It's a short, unique podcast to help supplement your life with entertainment, that of which has been freshly picked from the blossoming orchards of weird and randomness. Today on this episode, expect film reviews, riddles, a new word to add to your vocabulary, and some very unusual news stories as normal. Of course, I'm Dan, and joining me on this podcast today is Lew.
Hello, everyone.
But of course, before we sort of venture out into the rest of the podcast, let's find out what Lew has been up to since our last podcast, really. So I believe you've now got a new job. You've had it for a few weeks. How's it going?
It's going well. It's going very well. It's obviously my first job, so I can't really compare it to anything I've done before. But it's good. It's going well. It's going well.
Is it what you were expecting from what you sort of read about it online on the job review, or, the job advert and so on?
To be honest, not exactly. Not exactly.
What's different?
It's a little bit slower paced than I thought it would be.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it's, for a company that's been around for 20 years, it looks like it's only just started. It looks like it's only just trying to get off the ground. But from all reports, it's going well. It's going well.
That's good. And just to confirm, it's an apprenticeship, isn't it? So you've got a bit of theory and stuff to do as well, haven't you?
Well, that's a little bit in the dark at the moment. I did apply to it through a college, but the paperwork is still nowhere to be seen. I'll have to see where it's going. But it's paying, which is good, which is what I want. So.
Well, that's good. Since our last podcast, I haven't really done a great deal different, to be honest. All work, no play. I guess the most sort of significant thing is that I bought a new car, which I should be getting relatively soon. Should be arriving soon. It's quite a complicated process buying a car. You've got to make sure it's the right one, because obviously if you're buying it with finance and so on, you've got to make sure it's definitely the right one, because it's a long time, it's a big commitment to make. However, I've chosen the car. I pretty much knew which car I wanted anyway. It's just actually finding the right one for the right price. But yes, on Saturday I went out and viewed a few cars and found one that I wanted, and I brought it. So I'm very, very, very pleased with that one. And in terms of like work and so on, that's all going well. There's not really a great deal to say aside from that, to be honest. However, I am aware that yesterday you went to the cinema to view a certain film which you've been raving about ever since, haven't you?
Oh yes, Stu. Yesterday I went to see the suspense thriller that is Prisoners.
How was it?
It was very good. I gotta say, right off the bat, it is extremely long. I was probably in the screening from about 5:30. Didn't get out until like 8:30. But the film is really good at keeping you in your seat. It keeps you asking questions, what is the purpose of this guy? What actually happened on that night? But the film stars Hugh Jackman and Jake Gyllenhaal as they investigate the disappearance of Hugh Jackman's daughter in the film. He goes on a bit of an insane tirade. The title Prisoners has a good and amazing kind of religious and metaphorical meaning. By the end of the film, you really begin to see, what the word prisoners means in terms of the film.
Mm-hmm.
But from everything from the beginning to the end, it's just fantastic. I gotta admit, at first I was quite unsure, but as soon as the plot picked up, things began to happen. Plot holes here and there began to open up. They eventually are closed definitively. It is a very rewarding cinema experience of a lifetime too. It is a very good movie.
Now, about those plot lines, you were saying earlier on that it opens up quite a few sort of threads, and then will close them at certain points, and as sort of the film goes on, you then start to make sense and you start to connect them yourself, which is quite a difficult thing to write and to put in. So if it's as good as you're saying it is, then that's quite a big feature, really. So out of 10, if 10 is the absolute best film you've ever seen in your life, what would you say Prisoners is?
For Prisoners, I've got to give it probably a good 8.5.
That's a decent score. That's an alright score. And of course, Prisoners is out now. You can see it in UK cinemas. You went to see it at the Odeon, was it?
It was at the Odeon, yes.
The Odeon. Now, I didn't have quite the scale of movie watching as you did. Instead, I'd ordered a DVD from Love Film. And we've had it since June, so we've had it for quite a while. Just been sitting on the side, haven't watched it yet, so we thought we'd sort of get round to actually watching it. So we popped it on in and we sort of sat down and watched it, and it's got Ewan McGregor in it. Salmon fishing in the Yemen River. Or the Yemen River, rather. And like I say, Ewan McGregor and obviously a few other sort of big actors. But I was mainly watching it for him, because I sort of love the movies that he always finds himself in. Because he always plays very similar characters to Ewan McGregor. But on this particular film, it's not an action film, it's not really an adventure film, I suppose. It's certainly not a thriller like Prisoners. It's more just a drama, I suppose. And it's set in modern day, and it's all about a big project by a sheikh that wants to set about salmon fishing in the Yemen River. And there's all these different problems because of course, salmon is a cold water fish. You'll find it in the Atlantic and so on, and in rivers in the north, sort of Europe and so on. But in Yemen, it's sort of Saudi Arabia area. It's that area of the world which is obviously quite deserty. It is quite warm. So there's all sorts of different things and that they've got to try and overcome. And Ewan McGregor's character just doesn't believe it at first. And then there's a little bit of a love story in it, I suppose. That's like a feature that runs through it, holds everything together. But it's mainly about this project and getting it to work and discovering and finding out more about yourself as the project goes on. So it's quite an uplifting and heartwarming sort of film. And there's a few sort of twists in it that you aren't really expecting, and your hopes and dreams are dashed and so on. But I think the moral of the story for this one is sort of never give up, even if it's not looking like it's going to be possible. But it's a very good film. Probably not one that I would watch again, because once you know the storyline, it gets, I guess, boring if you watched it again. But I'd give it a 7 out of 10, definitely. I did quite enjoy watching it.
Did you see I Love You, Philip Morris? Have you seen that one?
I have. I got that through Love Film a few months ago, and that is a fantastic film. I put that at an 8.5, 9.
That film's a very different film for many reasons.
Oh, I love that film, I did.
But I saw that a couple of months ago online, and I gotta say, even though many of the themes are quite controversial, would you say that's the word? Controversial? Yeah,
I suppose so. There's a few illegal themes in it.
It's a very different film, that one, that deserves more than, I think, its credits need more credit, I think.
Yeah, the best thing about that film is that it's based off a true story, and when you think about all the different things that happen in it, it's almost unbelievable that all this happened, but it is backed up. It was a true story about a real sort of relationship, a real couple, really. But yes, those are the films that we recommend. It's Prisoners, Salmon Fishing in the Yemen River, and I Love You, Philip Morris.
Yes, just throwing that one in there.
Now, on the last podcast, Lou, you gave me a riddle to try and solve.
I did.
And I must admit, I haven't done very well. So, for those listeners that didn't listen to the last episode, and boo to you, what was your riddle for the last episode?
The riddle that I proposed last episode was, the more you take, the more you leave behind. What are they?
So at the time I said footsteps. That's what I said at the time. I wasn't too sure about it, and I'm equally unsure. However, I'm going to keep that as my answer. So is the answer footsteps?
You are correct.
Am I really?
Yes, you are.
Really?
Yep.
Footsteps.
Yep. That was it.
Really?
Yes.
That's the more you take, the more you leave behind. Footsteps.
Yep.
That's incredible. Well, I've got a riddle for you to try and solve. This one's a good one, because you've got to keep your wits about you on this one. So are you ready for this podcast riddle?
Rubbing my hands together, bring it on.
Okay. I would like you to tell me on the next podcast, how can a man or woman go 8 days without sleeping? How can a man or woman go 8 days without sleeping?
Oh, that's a very, that's an intriguing one, that one. It's a very different one.
How is that physically and scientifically possible? That's what I want to know. That is your riddle. That's your task to go and do. Have you got any ideas?
On the spot? No.
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 That's fine. Because the other task that I generally tend to set, and that we sort of set each other, is to go out each podcast and find one of the strangest news stories we can. And I must admit, my news story this week is quite an interesting one. It's quite a funny one. But yes, what have you managed to bring to the table this week, story-wise?
Well, last week I talked about the Nazi cat with the swastika embroidered on the fur of the cat. But this week, this one is a very weird one indeed. Police called to the report of upside-down man, but they find a scarecrow instead. Listen to this, my friends, listen to this. When officers received an emergency call about a man trapped upside down in a ditch in a sleepy Oxfordshire village, they quickly rushed to the scene. But they were in no mood for laughing after the man, reportedly in distress, turned out to be a scarecrow. And yes, and I'll link the rest of that news story in the description. Got a statement from the landlord, because it was found outside a pub. Mm-hmm. Our scarecrow was one of 14 made by villagers.
So it's just like an artwork that's sort of gone wrong, and people have interpreted it as being an actual dying person.
Well, the picture depicts a mound of soil with 2 legs sticking out. It looks like people have called 999, they've gone over, they've had a look, and it was a scarecrow.
That's ridiculous.
It is very ridiculous, but do tell me what your story is.
Well, mine was taken from metro.co.uk, which is always guaranteed to have some funny storylines on it. And this one revolves around an airline selling tickets to an obese man. What tends to happen is, of course, on economy flights, there's not a lot of room in the seats. So if it is that you are, bigger than 1 seat, most airlines will tell you to buy 2 seats. So you sort of take up, enough space, so you're not making it uncomfortable for the passengers. Now, a certain man walked into a, airport, and Les Price is his name, from South Wales, and he was told by this airline that he'd have to buy an extra ticket because he weighed more than 20 stone. However, when he purchased both of these seats for a return trip to Ireland, the seats weren't next to each other. For some reason, the airline staff had booked him 1 seat in one part of the plane and the other seat in another part of the plane.
Oh, right.
It says here, on the way back from Ireland, 1 seat was in row 17 and the other in row 19. He said they didn't have a clue. When I finally got on the plane, one was an aisle seat and the other was by the window in a 3-seat row. So not only were they different rows from each other, they were completely, they weren't even next to each other had they been on the same row. However, in his credit, he is trying to lose weight and he's on the NHS weight management clinic. But the airline is very silly and booked him separate seats, which makes no sense at all.
People nowadays. People.
It really, really is. Now, this is the part of the show where I like to give you, Lou, and of course our wonderful listeners, an extra word to add to their vocabulary. And sometimes these words will be completely new words with completely new definitions, or they might be words we already know, just with different definitions, or even words that we've, heard being thrown around, but never really known what they quite mean. This episode's word is in that last category, where I'm sure a lot of people will have heard about this, but not everybody, knows what it's called, or knows what the definition is for this. This episode's word is queef. And taken from Wikipedia and the Urban Dictionary, queef is an expulsion of air from the vagina, usually after sexual intercourse, often with a wet sound.
Great.
So there we go, if you've ever had that happen to you, you now know what the official name is, it's queef. And of course you can use it in a variety of social applications. For example, does anyone fancy a queef burger? And I was walking home the other day, when suddenly I queefed. So there you have it, queef.
Queef.
A expulsion of air from the vagina, usually after intercourse, often with a wet sound. And you'll never be confused by that word again, thanks to Dan's dictionary time.
Queef.
Queef. And on that bombshell, that pretty much wraps up this week's episode, I think.
God.
Anything else you would like to say?
Ends too quickly, man. Ends too quickly.
It really does. It just flies by. So if you think you know the answer to my riddle, which was, how can a man go 8 days without sleeping? All you need to do is comment on this video wherever you may be listening to it. Facebook, YouTube, all the usual things. Comment, let us know what you think the answer is, and then we'll let you know on our next podcast. But all being that, obviously, just the general thank you very much for listening in and indulging in us for the last sort of 10, 15, 20 minutes.
Yes, thank you all for listening, and we hope to see you next time with more stuff.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.